Donna,
Yeah.
Hi, good
welcome.
morning.
Hey, Donna.
Hi. Because I have three small kids.
Oh wow.
So, yeah.
Well,
My,
thank you for pushing through for this.
yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, to get out of it, we're hoping that there's healing in talking. So that's also good. I've been since I started this Instagram. I don't know about hers. Since I've been doing this talking on the Instagram, I've been like feeling more healing from it.
Hmm.
And it's just healing and talking too. And it telling your story. So
Yeah, yeah, there's both, right? Feeling and,
and inspiring people.
yeah, I think so too.
Cool,
Hmm.
cool. All right, we'll get right into it. So, the question I want to ask, the first question is, how did it happen? How did your anxiety come about?
It's funny, I don't know. I've gone in when I was doing coaching, working with a coach, we got into some of it, some of the why, like some of the things, the triggers, some of the things that caused it, some of the life experiences. But for me, I always had anxiety since I was a little kid. Like I remember always having a sick stomach and being embarrassed. I
Mm,
remember panicking in the car. So my memories that went the furthest back really were filled with anxiety.
wow.
So, like I said, I found some reasons, but could it have been that I was like a highly sensitive kid? Could it have been some things that were going on at home? Of course. Um, but I never had that moment. Like sometimes you hear people like they get in a car accident or there's a death, or I never had that. I had my identity was anxiety because I've never known anything different.
Wow.
And that's why healing was so significant for me. And I'm not saying I'm healed of everything. Like life is always going to have
No, no, anxiety is
trials.
always there.
Yeah, we're always going to have emotions. But I never thought I could be someone who didn't have anxiety because it was like woven into who I was. And so that's why it was like, you know, so incredible and miraculous because I'm like, wow, now I have this different identity. And now I know who Donna is, not just
Wow.
anxious Donna.
Gave me goosebumps. That's
Yes.
interesting that you had an identity now because the anxiety became your identity
Yeah.
and you lived your life with the anxiety through your anxiety.
Yeah, through that lens. And there are other things that happened, right? That you say, but for me, it was almost like when these difficult life experiences came, they brought healing for me more than anxiety because now I was able to actually have real feelings about things. And it's almost like I was forced to feel. So, for example, like when my dad died, it was terrible. It was like, it was horrible. I was completely out of control. But I actually had a healing with it because I was like, oh wow, like maybe a panic attack is coming from a real place. It's
Mm,
not just something that because everybody, people think they're alone, right? Especially if anxiety's new. Nobody else feels like this. I'm the only one. I'm crazy. Meanwhile, everybody has something, and especially now, after the past few years, most people have experienced anxiety.
mm,
And so for me, those life experiences really brought out, especially my father's death, of like, wow, this feeling of panic is legitimate and it must have come from somewhere.
yeah,
It's really
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, for me, it was when I was doing, I did some acting and there was an overnight performance and I had to take a lot of coffee in order to kind of like stay alive. My
Hmm.
character was like a wild character and I drank so many. And then the next middle of the night, I rushed myself to the emergency room because I couldn't breathe and I was like feeling complete panic. And I think the coffee, the 5 or 6 cups of coffee that night, like
Yeah.
woke it up, like get up, but like it was always there for me too, like the fighting between my mom and my dad, the bullying in school. There was always, I never had peace. I went to school, I was worried. I went home, I was worried. So
Yeah.
it's always there, kind of just chilling. So the breaking point, do you think, was your dad?
I don't know, I think that gave me some kind of realization. And it was actually like for me, one of the biggest parts of healing was letting go of control. And I had to do a lot of work before I let go of control. I had to recognize that I was a control animal, right? I was trying to control everything.
Mm,
But after he passed, I remember we saw him and then we left and I was standing on the corner and I was looking at the floor and my cousin looked at me and she goes, "Don't try to figure it out.
Oh wow, she
You
knew you
can't
already.
figure it out." Yeah, because she had lost both parents by that point.
Okay, okay.
And so I was like, "You're right." Like something just hit me and I'm like, wow, I really can't figure this out. Like some things you just cannot figure out.
Yeah.
And you just can't control. So that was definitely like a moment in my life, but then it took years of still struggling, and then finally, and of course trying, right? Like we all try different things and they don't always work. Different things work for different people. And then for me, it was last year when I really got into like validating what I feel, recognizing what I feel, right? Not everything's anxiety. Some of it's anger. Anger was a huge problem for me and I didn't know I had it. And it was just reconnecting.
So you had anger from somewhere in your childhood? The anger?
I think it was, I mean, society as a whole, where I am, right? Like, I don't know, or I haven't traveled the world, but I know we don't really accept anger. Like, people are not allowed to have emotions in general.
Yeah.
Like, my kids, like, from what I've learned, like, when I let them be angry, throw stuff, yell, say how they feel, not in a disrespectful way, right? We train in them to teach them. I've had people say like, "Oh, you need to control your kid." No, I don't. My child needs to validate and acknowledge what they feel and then teach them how to properly use those feelings.
I do a lot of somatic experience that heals the body.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I always say when you get into a car accident, heaven forbid, your brain gets traumatized, and then your body holds a lot of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already 7 years in with therapy, and I was like, why am I still feeling like crap? I wake up middle of
Mm-hmm.
the night, have to journal, and my body was still not processed because my therapist was only cognitive, which is mental,
Yeah.
and I had a lady, a practitioner who did only body work, and she showed me how to like self-soothe myself and a lot of crazy stuff. And
Yeah.
once I got rid of that, man, I'm like, I really get triggered by stuff. Like that was the final last piece of the puzzle where my old trauma from my past, which was a lot. My body was holding it, and it was like she said it was like stretching a slinky in your whole body, and it's just so much tension. And she goes, every time we heal, the slinky gets closer and closer and closer until we have it completely together. Or do you have anything?
That's a good question. I just haven't spoken and I got in my head, I don't know if you know that feeling when you don't speak that much. And I just used to get in my head like I didn't speak and I have to speak something. And yeah, that's why I used to be anxious, for example. So I used to have like we were four of us, and if I didn't speak that much, I just felt anxious and I just started to feel bad. And that's what I came up now as well. And it's interesting, like handling this and just letting go and say.
It's a new experience though. Like last night I was like, "Oh, this is great. I'm not even like feeling nervous." And then this morning I was like, "Oh, my stomach." So I was like, "All right, I'm going to eat something. I'm going to drink my tea," because it's just a new experience, right? Anything that's different or unusual, it's like our brains say this is dangerous because it's new. Meanwhile, it's like, no. And this is a big part of the healing for me too, is I used to always, everyone's against me, right? I got to have my defenses up. I can't try. But now, like when I went into this, if someone would have asked me a year ago, I almost would have felt confrontational, like I have to defend myself. But I came into it with you guys, and we just met, a couple weeks ago online?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, this is a safe space. They're into the same thing. If I don't make sense or I stumble over my words, nobody's judging or criticizing me. Like, we're just trying to help people.
Yeah, I used to have that as well. Like, I felt like everyone is against me. And I just didn't know where it came from. But I just have to tell myself that we are together. Everyone just want to have fun. And that's it. So yeah, I just had to reprogram my mind. because this, which I just mentioned, I think is coming from a mindset like everyone is against me, everyone is judging me. I just want to be perfect, and it's just my ego coming up. Like, yeah. But I think is depending on the personality as well. Like, I'm an introvert, and that's why I'm getting these feelings as well. Like, an extrovert usually doesn't get that, I think, because he's just outgoing, he can speak like forever, and yeah, I think mostly is with introverts.
I didn't even know I was being triggered. I didn't even know I was angry.
Mm.
And then learning, now I can say, like, I see a shift in myself, and I could say, like, what's going on? And then I could, like, one of the things I do a lot is, I just learned it recently, the havening technique.
Okay.
And it's a really good one. Just like, you rub the pressure points, and it's really like basically like hugging yourself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was not about this stuff when I first started. I was like, inner child work, somatic, like, what is this? But I was different, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't hear about this stuff. You don't hear about having intuition from your body. Like, I've cut off friendships because every time I talk to them, I started realizing I feel sick every time I'm talking to this person. And I let my body start to lead. And it just made such a big difference. I mean, of course, there's still a thinking part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talking part of it. But a lot of it is just like, what's actually going on inside that I've just neglected.
Yeah. Wow. So the Haven stuff is like, where was the major one that you used whenever you had like an anxiety feeling? What?
So it changed. It was like it varied, right? At first, I just, like when I was in coaching, I just basically was just knowing what I felt. So every day I would spend a half hour listening to this recording. What did I feel? I would hear certain things. Where did I feel it in my body? And it was learning how to not go to my story or reasons why, or daydreaming to get away from my thoughts, my feelings. And then eventually, once I got good at like, okay, I'm starting to identify, because I didn't know really any of my emotions. And then once I learned, I started using like some tapping modalities. There was one that was really funny, actually. You go through, and at the end, you slap your wrist. And I was in the car with my husband and my kids. And so I started getting the feelings, right? My stomach's getting sick. I'm feeling trapped. And so I do this modality, and I slap, and he loses it and just starts laughing. Because he's like, I thought you were going to morph into a Power Ranger. He's like, what's going on? So I broke the state, and then I felt better. But some of this stuff, you're right, like you said, it's wacky, but it works, and it kind of jolted me out of it. But see, the difference I feel is my whole life I had techniques. I had the rubber band, right? Rubbing my hand, like whatever it was. But I didn't have the most important part, was like reconnecting to myself. That's what was missing the whole time. Like these techniques do help, right? Because they're pressure points. The havening helps. They
work together with self-understanding. Yeah, they work together with self-understanding, right? You have to like understand what's going on. Like I always say, it's you against your brain. It's like you against your anxiety. So if you can step away from yourself and see your anxiety, because all the time it's a connection. And once you're like this with your anxiety and you're living it, that's no good,
No. And it's also like, but to answer your question, sorry, the techniques, they varied. Some were tapping. Some were just, after a while when I started learning, because one of the things I still struggle with is like, I don't like to use labels, but OCD. And so that's an interesting kind of thing, right? Because you know it's not true, but then you still do it. And so one of the things I started learning is, all right, sometimes you sit with the feelings, you work through them, validate them, but sometimes you just have to break state. And so what I started doing later on is like, if I started getting into this thought loop, I would just do like a plank. Physically get my body, right, out of it, just to where I can't think of it. And it wasn't invalidating, it wasn't running. I was make sure I don't run or invalidate. But it was just because it's like, it's almost like if someone's gossiping or being negative, you just walk out the room. So I started to learn when I need to sit with something and when I need to leave the room. And so just different modalities at different times. I don't use many of them really anymore. I just don't feel like I need them as much. But when I do, different ones are there depending on what I need.
So now, over time, like how long has it been since you kind of like fully got yourself out of the anxiety?
So I feel, well, I'm not going to say I'm fully out of it. Day-to-day life, I don't feel like an anxious person. If I got on an airplane, what would happen? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's okay because I don't fly for a living, right? I stay home with my kids. That's what I do. I don't want to have anxiety when I'm home with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, so I did somatic therapy. I started in April, over a year ago. And I think it really took a year. And then more recently, it's just been like clicking. Because a lot of it was, all right, I had these issues I had to deal with. I had people I needed to forgive because I really truly believe forgiveness and healing go together. If someone does something to you or you do something to someone, whether you're forgiving yourself or someone else, I feel like that healing is attached to the forgiveness. It lets it go. And I know that's controversial, especially in this space. You know, some people say you don't have to forgive. That's just a personal belief of mine. And so I went through different people that hurt me, different people that I felt hurt me. Even if they in reality had not, I had to validate that part of myself. And so I went through that and went through different life experiences I needed to talk about and work through, especially with, you know, we did some of these techniques. Like I lost my brother and it was very traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but I had these visuals and these images that I couldn't get out of my head. And so we had to work through those. But then after a while, I basically cleaned everything out, right? So now I'm not overflowing with memories and anger and thoughts and resentment. But then it was like habitual. I'd get in the car and I'd still get anxious. But then after, and my coach would say, it's a habit. Now it's a habit. It doesn't have any power because the power's in your body. We work through the body. And so then it became doing things every day with my techniques. But now I really feel like I have these moments where I make changes in my life and my circumstances. Because right when you heal too, you start seeing things clearly. Things that were not there before that you didn't notice.
You wear a new pair of glasses, that's what I say.
You definitely do. And in relationships the most, you start seeing like, whoa, this is different than we thought it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to really start making changes. And in my life, especially with my kids, I had spoiled my kids. I was so afraid of hurting their feelings. So now we're disciplining and we're training and we're going through that. Wow. But the point of what I'm saying is now it's like the circumstances, I'm actually changing my life. And that's what's making me even less anxious because I realized I would just live in chaos. I would start to feel like, okay, I could relax. And then, I got to take on another project. I had 2 websites going. I don't even have one up and running. Why do I have 2? So I had to get rid of one. I didn't have to, but I chose to get rid of one and focus solely on healing, not on health, not on alternative. Healing anxiety.
Did you feel like taking on a lot of because my wife's mother does this. She takes on a lot of stuff as a coping technique to push down the stuff that you're feeling. So the more you keep yourself distracted, the more the anxiety doesn't come up. That was like an idea for you, coping idea.
Yeah, and it was more like my coach actually called me a dry drunk because he's like, because to me in my head, well, I'm not drinking, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. So I don't have any addictions. I don't have any of that. Meanwhile, intellectually, that's where I go to escape, right? And so for me, it was, okay, well, I have to start another website. Or I have to keep busy with this. Or I have to try to do this. And I have to... At one point, I was trying to do 3 different things. An oils, like a essential oils business, alternative health website, and the anxiety website. And then I just kept spinning. My head kept spinning. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm in this loop. I'm doing it to myself. And of course, my coach would always point this stuff out, right? On Instagram. What are you doing? It's like another distraction. And I'd be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I'd sit with it and I'm like, that's probably right. And so what I did is I took away that stuff, right? So now I have my one thing that I talk about is healing anxiety because that's really the most important to me.
And when you take on the one, how do you feel? Do you feel like any
the boredom. The boredom was killing me. I have to sit with the boredom.
Because the chaos from your past, you have to match the chaos from your past. That's probably
and it takes time, right? Like to rev down. So I've just been like, I mean, my house is cleaner than it has ever been. I'm doing more, but then I also tell myself you can't just do either. Sometimes you have to. So I'll force myself to sit outside and just look at the birds. Because I'm like, it's okay to just sit. It's okay to not be like this.
If you stay out of, I have a video on the Instagram. If you stay out of your body too long, you're not able to heal the stuff that's bothering you. So if you
Yeah.
have moments where, like, I take a walk and I'm in my body and I'm thinking, then you're able to be in the moment. And the more you're in the moment, the more stuff can't get the best of you.
Yeah.
But when you're distracted, you're in rinse cycle in your head, and when you're there, then you're easily, we call it, like in therapy, we call it like out of space. You're out of space. You're back in the childhood person, and that stuff
Mhm.
will eat you if you're not present. That stuff will eat you. You know.
No, it's true. And I noticed that. It's funny you say that because, like, now if I start getting a thought, right? So, one of the things I struggle with still is, so I struggle with, I have the thoughts, but I don't give in to the thoughts, right? So, I'll go to eat something and I'm like, oh, there's something wrong with this, right? I'm gonna get food poisoning. And what I do instead of convincing myself, right? No, because you can't convince yourself of like, I don't know everything. I'm not all knowing. I
Mm-hmm.
go back into my body. Where do I feel something? What does it feel like? And that's just what I do now. I get out of my head and I physically go back in my body. And I'm like, oh, I'll feel something here. Even talking about it, I feel something here. And then that's how I kind of sometimes get out of, like you said, that wash cycle, which is a really good way to say it.
Yeah.
Is where's my body? And then a lot of times it just goes away on its own because I'm not running from it. I'm not trying to control it. I'm not focusing on it. I'm just refocusing on, I'm physically here,
You could also tell yourself that it's okay sometimes to just sit, have a good time with your family, and have this thing live inside you. That
Yeah, that's
makes
true.
it go away fast for me because people don't talk about how complex the brain is, and people don't say, "Hey, I'm walking happy," but there's chaos in my head right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes it go away so fast for me is that if I'm in the middle of having a good time and this anxiety comes, I tell myself, I'm like, everybody gets this, like we all deal with anxiety while we're having a good time. It's fine, and you minimize it, you make it smaller, and then you make the good time bigger.
Yeah,
Like if you have your family around, you're having a good time with the family, you start to learn how to say, you don't give it any kind of love. You just say, everybody has weird moments while they're eating breakfast. It's normal. It's just part of life. The anxiety is going to live with you and come out and try to get the best of you because everything triggers us. We have, you see a stove, you get triggered because you remember when you burn your hand. You're walking across the street, you remember a lady maybe got hit by a car. Like
yeah.
every little thing brings up something. That's how the brain works. So
Mm-hmm.
society sucks because we don't explain this. Everybody looks happy-go-lucky, especially on social media, and nobody says at this moment I'm complete ball of anxiety, but
Yeah.
I'm smiling at a birthday party, and that's what you got to see. And like a lot of us, when we have that, and I had that too, when I had the anxiety, I'd be like, I'm a weirdo right now. I'm supposed to be having a good time. I'm pretending to have a good time, and I'm suffering with this anxiety. Who does that? Nobody. I'm weird. No. As soon as I say this is acceptable, you can have a good time
Yeah.
while living with the anxiety, the stuff just goes down.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's true because a lot of people that I'll talk to online, it's always, I feel so alone, right? I feel so like I'm the only one. And it's
Mm-hmm.
true. And my aunt said that to me years ago when I was a kid. I remember we were in the diner and I have a history of family history, right? Anxiety, depression.
Mm.
And because there's a lot of trauma in the family. I mean, you know, I know some people say like you carry it in the genes, but whatever it is, it's in the family. But so she actually looked at me one day and she's like, "You're not unique." And like, we have a society. I'm unique. I'm special. I'm one of a kind, right? And she was like, "No." She goes, "You're not the only person who feels this way. Because there are a lot of people who feel this way." She goes, "You feel alone, because you're in it alone." She said, "But you're not unique." And that was like one of those beginning, like starts to get your mind working. And so that's so important. That was really helpful though to think of, just like, okay, this is just here. It's going to coexist. I actually had a dietitian who said that to me because I didn't realize some of it was food and things, right? But mostly my stomach always bothered me because of emotional stuff, anxiety, whatever traumatic things had happened. And my dietitian actually said to me one time, I was like, "Well, what if my stomach gets sick?" She goes, What if your toddler had a fit in the supermarket? You'd pick them up and bring them with you. She goes, it's the same thing. Your stomach bothers you, it just has to come along for the ride. You can't let it control you. And it's kind of like what you said, like, it's just there. It can exist, and I can exist, and I don't have to control it, and this is just life. I can still have fun.
This is the problem, the educational level. Like, commercials don't show, like, hey, when you're walking down the street and you have anxiety laughing with your friends, that's okay. There's no education.
Yeah.
You're allowed to have everything. The brain has so many wires and transmitters and everything else. Like, how the heck can you be perfect? There's so much triggering going on in your head that people don't educate people. Say, you're okay right now. If you're walking down the street and you're laughing with your friend and you're in complete chaos in your mind, there's nothing wrong with that, and it is. And that's how I could see it like this. And the minute I tell myself that, it just goes right down. Like, you're not getting the best.
Yeah. I guess because it's not really getting control either. Like, you're not giving it, like...
Yeah.
And it's also soothing. Like, so my husband, we're not total opposites, but he doesn't have the same type. He has his own issues, but not the same as mine as far as, like, the overthinking, right? And my son, he's 9, and he said he'd get, like, intrusive thoughts, right? Like, well, what if my head exploded? And he'd start to get really nervous. And I forgot how I handled it, but it made him worse, right? Like, made him totally worse. So I said, let's ask Daddy. So we go to my husband. My husband's like, well, James, you have good thoughts and you have some scary thoughts. He goes, you just get both. This kid walked away. He's like, Daddy is the greatest. I'm like, because I'm overanalyzing, right? You're
chopping it up, right?
Yeah, and all he needed to hear was like you said, it happens. It's normal. And so every time it comes up again, I'm like, all right, that helps him. I'm like, remember what Daddy said? And he's like, yeah, you're right. Because it's not invalidating, right? We still validated what he felt. We didn't ignore him. Oh, you shouldn't think. We validated what he felt, but then it was just like, it is what it is.
And it gets me mad because, like, I was talking to Urs about, like, people like Tony Robbins. They have a whole weekend, and I watched the whole snippet of it on YouTube, and people are writing so much stuff down and chopping it up and throwing tomatoes in and cucumbers, and it's just like, why has it become such a science?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I used to meditate back in the day, but now I don't meditate as much. I have tricks that are so simple that remove it, and I wish they would just teach us the quick, direct way. But it's just like, to make money, they got to go around, under the bridge, over the water, and it gets overwhelming that you're like, this is too much. I can't do this,
Yeah. And what you notice too is people want to show, right? Like, even the simplest things, it's hard to accept that things are so simple.
It doesn't sell either. That's not sellable. Like, sellable and representing a person that does, like, healing, they have to make it, like, dazzle, and so.
Or they have to have a certain outfit, a certain look, and they got to be very, and it's really not like that. Like, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just very 1, 2, 3, but it doesn't really sell if you keep it that simple. Mm-hmm. So I was going to tell you, there's a gentleman on YouTube. He's really good. He talks about, whenever you get an intrusive thought, think the opposite. So if I think about failing, I failed sometime. Like, I failed, like, say, in a moment. I'll think about time when I was successful, times I did great, and you nip it right away. Because sometimes when you're draining, you're going down the toilet with the sensation of failure or whatever it is, you don't know what the trick is. So what I do is, if I'm feeling like failure, right away I do the opposite. Remember the time I was successful. Or if I'm like not funny with my wife, I'll think about the time where we were dying laughing and I said something really funny. And I'll stay with that until I forget about the worry about not being funny with my wife. And he talks about doing the opposite of what you're worrying about at that moment.
Okay.
It's a reprogramming.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Like, if you're afraid of doing something,
and you just do the opposite, so that you don't let it rummage around. He goes, if you give it life for more than like 10 seconds, then it's just gonna own you.
That's true, because it's like a foothold, and then it's harder to get out of it.
Yeah.
But that's about recognizing too. Like, that's one of the things I learned somatically. Like, I would start, okay, do I feel something? And sometimes you do. You start to feel something, and you realize, oh wait, there's been a shift, and it makes it easier to now snap out of that. because now you're like, all right, there's something really going on. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, like, you get thoughts, and I notice this now. A thought will come that used to, I'd get trapped. Now it just passes.
Mm.
You know.
So what was the
That's
main
something else.
ingredient that you feel like from before and now of the dialogue that you tell yourself that just it passes? Or is it
Well,
from healing the trauma with the somatic?
yeah. So a lot of it was like healing the trauma, but really it was validating myself. That was the biggest thing. I think the compassion, like the self-compassion, and acknowledging what I feel, but also allowing myself to feel it. That was huge for me because it was always, oh, it wasn't that bad. That person had it worse, right? It wasn't that bad. And for me, or, oh, you shouldn't feel like that, right? Because of the perfectionism. Oh, how can you feel like that? Like you were saying, like it's just normal. You could be walking down the street smiling and you have chaos in your head and nobody wants to say it or acknowledge it because, oh, I'm abnormal. I should be strong. I should be able to do everything. I should actually be happy. When that's not true, like we're humans. And so for me, it was having compassion and just saying, like, oh, wow, I am really angry at my 3-year-old, right? Who wants to say that? Like, what kind of adult is like, I'm annoyed with. But it's a human feeling. Like, it doesn't, like you
Mhm.
said, there's so much science behind it. Your kid kicks you in the face with a shoe. There's a history back there. And now that the history a lot of times has been healed, I don't get triggered as much. But even it was just validating, like, all right, you're not a jerk because you feel this way. You're not a this and that. Okay. And just feeling it and allowing it, not behaving, not being like, oh, 3-year-old, you kicked me in the face with a shoe. But the feeling part is just acknowledging it and being like, wow. And then when I went back to other past hurts, it wasn't saying, oh, that shouldn't matter. I should be strong enough. I should be able to just deal with that. No, it was saying, wow, that really hurt. That person really hurt me. I felt really small. I felt
Mm.
really out of control. And that's, I think, the part that reconnecting to myself and not abandoning myself. Now the world's not as scary. Now I don't feel like everybody's against me.
So basically, you put the brakes on everything because you were just too busy. You just didn't want to deal with it. You're like, I gotta go, I
Yeah.
gotta go. So now you put the brakes, and you're kind of looking at the birds and the trees now, and you're slowing it down.
Yeah. Yeah, slowing down was a huge part of it, right? Because if you just keep going, you can't think, right? You just keep going. And
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
was really sitting in that, like, kind of space, like, and that's one of the things that my coach would do. Like, I'd try to skip over something, and he would just sit there and just stare. And I'm like,
You're
trying
doing
to
it
weasel
again.
my way out of it.
Yeah, you're doing it again, right? So it was always reminding yourself, don't skip over it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like give yourself some love. Don't be so mean, right? You're like, I have no time for me. I got 5 other projects to do,
Yeah.
and
Or
that's
just
the
not connecting. Like, that's why the inner child stuff, like, I thought it was, like, woo-woo weird. But if you could, but they even say, right, like, different traumas, you kind of get stuck in that place in different ages. And so for me, it was even just validating, like, looking at myself as a person and saying, like, would I do this to my kid? Would I tell them, like, oh, cut it out? No, I never do that with my kids. It's, man, that really bothered you. I'm so sorry to hear that. Even if they were, like, totally wrong
yeah.
or it's totally not logical, I wouldn't do that to them. And I was doing that to myself. Well,
What
that's
I
so
learned,
stupid,
a good
right?
trick I learned from a book I read. If let's say your kid, God forbid, goes into like something heavy like a car accident, you
Yeah.
give them a pretend remote control, and you say, okay, you can play what happened to you. You can pause it.
Oh,
If it's
wow.
sections I talk about, you can fast forward it. We
Yeah.
can talk about it again. You can rewind it. All right. So you're in control of the remote, and you can give them a pretend remote, and you tell the story. Okay. So can you tell me the day that you got into the car accident? What happened? What did you feel? And the kid's gonna be like, I want to fast forward that part. Okay.
Oh, wow.
When you got home, what happened? How were you thinking? All right, let's play that. If they're feeling heavy, they can pause it. That was like big. I was like really something.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I never heard of that. Because I've heard of, like, I read in The Body Keeps the Score, they would talk about acting. Have you read that book?
No.
It was really good. So that was, it's all about the science behind, like, trauma. They would take, war veterans and who had PTSD, and they do brain scans and just show how their brains would react when they were actually having like a moment, like a memory.
Wow.
And like, so how their certain parts of their brains would shut down, and it was different than when they were just a flashback. I mean, when they were having a flashback. But anyway, he was talking about how like acting is really therapeutic
Oh, wow.
for people, and also people could redo their life. So they would have a group of people, and say the father was abusive. The person would be able to pick one of the people and say, all right, this is my father, and you're going to sit there, and this is who I want my father to be. And they kind of got to rewrite their story. And it just seemed like really therapeutic, where it was like they now got to control and like help their brain process that memory, but now also it wasn't delusion. It was like they kind of got to create this new memory. And I noticed my kids will do that. Like we had an incident where my dogs got out. We lived in an apartment complex, and this big dog grabbed my small dog by the throat.
Oh, wow.
My husband goes over and he breaks it up and he gets the dog off of our dog. And it was really traumatic, and two out of my three kids saw this, and so we let it settle. But then later that night, they were like, well, this is what we should have done. And they rewrote the whole story. And I just let them. And my husband's like, all right, guys, go to sleep. I'm like, no, they need to do this. They need to process, they need to feel in control. And so they did this whole thing, and it was really cute, like listening to what they would have done. Some of it got a little violent, so we kind of like, but
They need to heal it,
yeah.
like when a person dies, you have to grieve. So everything is a grieving. So the car accident, and my parents growing up, we didn't want to talk about emotions, so I kept everything in.
Yeah.
But you have to grieve it. So your kids were just grieving the moment. They're making it fun, but it was a grieving thing, and you got. And I do it with my wife. Like now, she understands. Before she used to get annoyed by it, but like something heavy happens to me, I'll talk about it for 2 3 days until I feel better. Like I want to make it alive and put it on a pedestal. I mean, obviously, there's you don't want to complain, but you do want to talk about it enough where it just like what we're doing now. It's grieving. Everything when you get it out is grieving.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But I came into it with you guys, and we just met, a couple weeks ago online?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, this is a safe space. They're into the same thing. If I don't make sense or I stumble over my words, nobody's judging or criticizing me. Like, we're just trying to help people.
Yeah, I used to have that as well. Like, I felt like everyone is against me, and I just didn't know where it came from. But I just have to tell myself that we are together. Everyone just want to have fun, and that's it. So yeah, I just had to reprogram my mind. Because this, which I just mentioned, I think is coming from a mindset like everyone is against me, everyone is judging me, I just want to be perfect, and it's just my ego coming up. Like, yeah. But I think is depending on the personality as well. Like, I'm an introvert, and that's why I'm getting these feelings as well. Like, an extrovert usually doesn't get that, I think, because he's just outgoing, he can speak like forever, and yeah, I think mostly is with introverts.
I think so too, yeah.
Sorry?
No, I think so too. Sometimes there's some of it is like, the trauma stuff or the life experiences, but some of it is really also personality. Like some people just have more of a tolerance for a lot of exposure, a lot of socializing, and other people, like myself, I have a limit, and then I need to like be alone to recharge, and then I can come back.
So do you consider yourself an introvert?
Yeah, like I don't try to use anymore, like I've tried to step away from labels so much as far as like, this is who I am, this is how I am. But for myself, I do know, you have the typical introvert of like, I need more time to recuperate, right? Like I'd only have so much socializing, which for me, I'm a stay-at-home mom, I homeschool. So I need to find those little nooks of space and time where I'm just alone and I don't have to talk, I don't have to entertain because I know myself. And then there are some people, and it's funny because I've seen mostly people with kind of more of my personality as a homeschoolers. If I was more like talkative and always wanted to have this, I got energy from people. I get energy from myself mostly, from books. It would be easier. But I also notice, like, with stuff like this, like, for me, in a crowd of people, I'm like, I don't know where to go. But something like this, or public speaking, or one-on-one is easier for me. And I think the
Mhm.
extrovert usually is, they don't get intimidated by the crowd, right? It's like their brain's just different.
Yeah, I would say the extrovert is getting energy from interacting with people, and the introvert is getting drained
Mm-hmm.
and is getting the energy from alone time. But it's an interesting topic because, yeah, I have a question. Like, do you think this is changeable? Like, you can change a little bit, like, you can be more extroverted, like, getting energy from interacting with people? Because I think this can be changed a little bit, at least. It cannot be changed totally, but at least a little bit it can be changed. And so the reason I'm saying this because, like, in the past, I got drained a lot from other people when I
Yeah.
interacted with other people, and it comes back to the mindset that everyone is against me. That's why I got drained. But once I just changed my mindset, like, okay, we are together, everyone is having fun, nobody's judging me, then I started to not get that drained, like, not losing that much energy from that.
That makes sense.
So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's changeable a little bit, at
I
least.
think so too. Yeah. And I think part of it is you're really yourself. Like, when we have all these life experiences that whether it's a person specifically or life that says you're like this, and now we have to be in survival mode, we don't really know who we are. Like, we don't know how we really want to be around people. I think, like, if you're introvert, extrovert, yeah, maybe my limit is not going to be like, I'm not going to be able to tolerate as much as someone else. Like, I need to go walk outside and get some air. But if I, like you said, feel like the whole world is against me, or I've always felt like social anxiety, right? Like, I think social anxiety is really me not being comfortable with myself. It really doesn't have much to do with other people. Then I'm not even going to know who I really am until I do start to heal, or I'm in that process. Like, I feel like our growth is stunted. But, like, but I also think that, like, physically, someone's going to be built to be a sprinter, right? Physically, the muscles in their body. And someone else is going to be a long distance runner. And that sprinter is only going to be able to do so much. It's probably never going to reach that other person, right? And the long distance runner.
Yeah.
Like, so you physically, mentally, emotionally start off in a certain place, and you're not going to be someone else. But if both of them are conditioned, like, in the best way possible, the best foods, the best exercise, the best mental health, they're going to know their full potential. But if one of them breaks their leg, or they don't eat right, or they overtrain, they're not going to know their full potential. So I kind of, like, look at it that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We have different limits. That's the point.
Yeah,
But we can a little bit expand that, like,
yeah,
extend
but
that.
you get restricted when you don't. So I could say, like, oh, I'm super introverted, but that could just be like, I'm paranoid and I'm on edge all the time and I can't be in a crowd. Because I've noticed myself enjoying things that I never liked before. Because, oh, I didn't like this. But no, it's not that I didn't like it. It's just that I was afraid of it.
Yeah, that's big.
Did you ever have like issues with your throat? Like me and him, we spoke about it last time that we had throat problems where we couldn't swallow, and I had that for a
Tension in
few
the
months.
throat.
The
Yeah.
anxiety was so heavy that you couldn't
Yeah,
swallow, and I used to
I
tap
had
the
that.
top of my tongue, the top of my roof of my mouth, just so I can get a swallow in.
Oh, yeah, because I think some of that actually happened to me last December. I got some kind of flu, and it was the worst. I mean, I have not been that sick since I'm a kid. And that brought out so much of my old issues, right? Like, all these different feelings. And I texted my coach and I said, I feel like I can't swallow. So we were at a different stage in therapy, and he goes, focus on that feeling. And I'm like, what? I'm like, well, what? Am I supposed to
Yeah,
avoid
it's so
this?
scary.
He's like, no, focus on it. And I did. And it was because, when you just don't feel good in general, and you have kind of like the stuffed throat and the stuffed nose, and I went and I felt like I was choking. And then after that, like, I felt like I couldn't swallow. And that was definitely scary, because that's part of your life, right? Like, and that's a big control thing for people.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think there's so many things somatically. There are things that I thought were, oh, I just hurt my shoulder. It was actually an emotional thing in my shoulder.
Wow.
And as I started working through things, I'm like, oh, wow, this is going away. Or it'll start flaring up. And I'm like, oh, wow. So instead of like just trying to get rid of it, I would actually sit with it and be like, what's going on? Why is this inflamed right now?
Yeah, it's energy. It's energy
Mm-hmm.
trapped. I call it trapped energy that needs to come out. And we
Yeah.
do a thing in somatic where we open up, we get a pail, an imaginary pail, and we open up our mouth and we remove the
Oh, wow.
energy. And then we also like you put like, the thing that attaches to your garden hose, the pipe. We throw
Yeah.
it in our chest and we open the valve and we pretend like all the negative liquids are coming out of you.
That's
And,
good, the
and I
visual
do that with
thing.
my wife too, like, because always we're all energy, so we have so much trapped
Yeah.
energy that's like, got to get out.
Yeah, that's really good.
And then sometimes I tell her when I'm in somatic, I say, "Is this cognitive or is this body work?" And she knows where she'll say it's cognitive, so she'll open her eyes, and then we start talking through it, and then she'll feel
Oh, that's
better.
good.
Yeah, so sometimes it's talk for the mind, and sometimes it's healing for the body. So it depends.
Yeah.
So, well, like, how is your diet? Has your diet like affected it? Like, were you eating certain things before, like sugary stuff, a lot of coffee that kind of like maybe set it off more?
I think everything did. I just felt like I was at such a heightened state that it was almost like everything set me off. I wasn't like it wasn't a phobia, right? Like you have one
Mhm.
phobia and that's the thing that gets you. I mean, and I believe most people don't. I believe it usually is deeper for everybody. But some people really do. Like, I'm just afraid of heights, right? Or I'm just, but for me, it was like I was always at, you know, 0, totally relaxed, 10, panic attack. I was like at a 7 at least all the
Okay.
time. So it didn't take much. But diet, I do believe there are things that did help. Like, so I have celiac disease, so I can't have gluten, right? So when I found that out, I removed gluten and I did feel a lot better. I noticed anger kind of went
Oh,
down a little
wow.
bit, some of the anxiety. Because, right, our bodies do affect everything. Dairy, more recently, I stopped having mostly. I noticed that affected me. But since I really have been feeling better, caffeine doesn't bother me as much.
Mhm.
It used to bother me a lot where I would be like, but now I feel like, all right, I had too much. I'm just gonna drink some water. Like where it used to be, I feel nervous. And I'm like, it's gonna pass.
No,
And
good.
then within a couple hours, like, so I'm not like taken hostage by my body as much anymore. Even if I don't always feel good, it's just like, because that used to be the thing, right? Health anxiety. Oh, I don't feel good. Even with my husband, like, he's not feeling good. I would have freaked out like a year ago, but now I'm just like, all right, here, I gave him some, remedies or whatever and go to sleep.
Okay.
So it's just different now.
Yeah, for me it was horrors. I used to watch a lot of horror stuff and like crime TV and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
that was heavy. I have to stop that. I had to stop horror movies, and I only drink decaf now, and my wife too. I'm like, we just only drink decaf
Yeah.
because I'll still get it. I'll still get like, especially if I do like, I don't know if you guys have Starbucks. If I do Starbucks, I'm
Oh
like,
no, I
ooh.
don't do that.
So, yeah. So it just, it's there. I guess maybe it's part DNA. I don't know, but it's still there. And my wife's also an edgy one because her mom was like super edgy too. And
Yeah.
my dad's like a crazy edgy person. So, but we're good as long as, like you said, as long as like the celiac, you know your levels. Like, if I have a lot of sugar, I'm like hyped up. I'm like ready to go and like nutty. So,
Yeah.
and if we both have coffee, caffeine, like watch out. We're like ready to
Yeah.
like battle. So you have to also know that you have to kind of like give up what you like that can give you like that sensation inside you.
Of course. Well, that's caring about yourself, really. Like when we repeatedly do things, and I think that is reconnecting to your body. Like,
Mm.
oh, because some people won't even realize. Like on the outside, you can look and be like, every time you have coffee, you're a nervous wreck. But until you actually know what's going on, you might not even recognize it. And that's just about like, I mean, of course, I think that the somatic work, talking, all this stuff helps heal, but we still live in physical bodies, right? That we're set off by people have allergies, right? None of this is going to heal an allergy. I mean, possibly it might help with inflammation, but we still have to be careful, or I should say, be mindful of what we're using. Like, I know, like I said, I'm all into like mostly natural stuff. So I know sometimes I can use oils, like essential oils, and certain ones are gonna help calm me. Do I use it like instead of dealing with my issues? No. But I know that it's gonna support me, just like certain foods, right? Hormones. Hormones is a huge thing that affects how people feel. Women notice these more because we have our like certain cycles.
Yeah.
But you know, any man who's married or has a girlfriend or has a sister or mom knows there's usually like a week where it's like, watch out. Like for most women, right? They're just super sensitive. This is all hormonal, it's all physical. So there
Imagine
is
like you're
like a
going through your
physical thing.
period. Yeah, you're going through your
Yeah.
period. Like, I'm a weirdo. What's wrong with me? Like,
Yeah.
until you get educated and know that, the
Yeah.
hormones are doing that to you, you're going to be in your head and say, I'm the only one that gets these weird moments. No,
Yeah.
that's what it's about. You educate yourself. You know that hormones, when you have your period, it creates this anger thing. And now you know. And now when you get it, you're like, it's hormonal. It's the same like we talked about earlier. Like,
Yeah.
everybody gets this. And now it just goes down, because it's
Hmm.
hormonal, you
Well,
know?
you take better care of yourself. Like, if that's what I've learned too, and that was a big shift. Instead of pushing through all the time for anybody, and this is something I have to talk to my husband about, right? Because men are doers, right? I got to do this. I got to do more. I got to, and I try to tell him like, you need to slow down. It's okay to say no. Like if I ask you to do something, you can say no. And so I'm trying to help him with that too. Like, slow down. Like you don't have to do it all the time. And that's what I realized with myself. Like if I'm feeling really tired, I'm not going to push myself to lift heavy. I'm not going to push myself to sit here and clean the house. Like I'll tell my kids, I need an hour. Just go. I need to just sit for an hour
Yeah.
and just read. And I would never do that before. And I think that's a big part of it. Like,
It has
it's
to. You
okay.
have to. You
Yeah.
have to be present in your body. Like, take a nice walk. Do you for
Yeah.
change. Like, don't forget about yourself. That's the big thing. So
But
the last question, and we get out of here. So, what advice can you give those that are in the anxiety fight at the moment? What can you say is your wording that can help anyone right now watching, like while they're dealing with it? Like, what is the best advice they can use at this moment?
so this is so hard because being in that moment, especially when it's this constant and you just feel like it's never going to end and you've tried so hard.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting doing dishes with three kids. They were like, I had three kids under four, and I sat there and I said, why am I still like this? I don't go partying anymore. I'm, settled down. I don't get into drama. And I remember sitting there feeling like almost hopeless, trying natural remedies, changing my diet, exercising, therapy, everything. So the only thing I really feel like is the most important is that you are not always going to be in this state. It feels completely impossible. It feels like this is never going to end and you're always going to feel anxious, whether it's the physical, the sick stomach, the throat. If you're in a relationship that you feel like is just draining you, or you feel like whatever it is, things are never going to get better, they can. It's just a different way of doing it. Because I went through this, I'm telling you, I'm 38 years old, and I've had feelings of anxiety my whole life, where I thought the depersonalization, the derealization, I didn't think I was here, I didn't feel like I was here. I'd look in the mirror, wouldn't recognize myself. Like, so I know I used to hear things like it was so bad. Not like any type of schizophrenia, but like when you're at that moment where you're just so like tense. So I know I've been there. I've been through it, and there is a way out, and you're working so hard and it's so frustrating, but you can get better. Anybody, I believe, can get better.
Oh, that's
And
good.
you're not alone. You feel like you're alone. You feel like you're trapped. I used to think, I'm in hell. This is hell. And I'm trapped here forever. And this is what I used to think. But it's just a different way of healing, and you can heal.
Wow. And it'll inspire a lot of people.
I hope so.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, you look so calm and so at peace. So people are gonna be like, yeah, especially women, because we're guys. So now, if a woman's watching this, they could say, yeah, us women can do it too. So it's a nice contrast of woman and man that we all lived it and we all survived it. So Without medication, right? Nothing.
No, I tried when I was like 16. But it just, the thing too for me was I wouldn't go on medication because I was afraid.
Me
And
too.
the more I started learning, and it's actually good because, like off the record, but more I started learning, this stuff really is like we use only homeopathy. Like that's how we treat. I don't know if you've even heard of it, but it's all energy medicine. It's not, and with homeopathy, what's really interesting is they take your mental state into account. So like if you like feel sick and you're panicking, you use that as one of the symptoms. And then as your mental state heals, then you know the medicine is working and then soon your physical state heals. So we don't use pharmaceuticals. I don't say people shouldn't, especially if they're suicidal.
Depends,
But
yeah.
yeah, like if it's going to keep you, it's going to have you survive. But for the most part, I feel like it just usually stunts your growth and does all these other weird physical things that are
Yeah,
scary.
yeah. It's a band-aid. Like let's say you're on vacation and you need a like a pill, then fine, but
Yeah.
you shouldn't do it on a regular basis. So can you tell us what the homeopathic stuff you were taking?
So for me, like for example, there's something called aconite. So it's for shock. Like my mom's on medicine and she's on prescription medicine. But around 3 o'clock, it starts to wear off. And so she was sitting there and she's like, I'm starting to get panicky. So I said right here and I gave her aconite. And like within 10 minutes, she's like, I don't know what that was.
Wow.
She's like,
That-
but it really helped. And the reason I like it is because it doesn't, so they call it an energy medicine because it doesn't, it's so hard to explain. I'm not a sciencey person, but it's very soft on your body. It works with your body, kind of like chiropractic. Like it helps open up the pathways. And so we use it for like almost everything, like
That's great.
stomach upset, headaches. There's even one called Ignatia. It's for grief because grief lives in your body. So it helps you work through grief. And there are stories of people who lost someone, and I've seen this stuff work. Like I can be very skeptical, but we had the kids that had fevers, and so we don't use Tylenol, Motrin. My husband still uses Motrin for himself, but I don't use any of this stuff for my kids. And my kids had fevers. They're kids, right? Can't even say placebo effect because they don't even know. Gave it to them. Within like 15 minutes, fever was down.
Wow.
Came back up again in like a few hours. Because you don't want to suppress a fever. I'll be out in a minute. No TV. 8:30 in the morning. I'm like, we're not having TV.
And they're ready to go. They just rested themselves. They're full of energy. So
Yeah.
tell everyone where we can find you, like your Instagram, your website, and a little bit what you do, like in your own business, and then we'll wrap up.
So you can find me at Feel to Heal Anxiety. That's it. And that's on Instagram, and the same thing, feeltohealanxiety.com. What I do is I blog about my personal experience with anxiety and healing. I try to keep it very, very real. I go through as I'm having, whether it's emotional issues or anxiety, and I share that because I really do feel like there's not enough raw, like as you're going through it, like I don't feel like there's enough of that out there. And so my goal really is to help you know why you feel anxious and what to do about it, really in like the simplest way by reconnecting to yourself.
And like, can somebody email you? Or, like, you have an email that somebody
Yeah,
can
so it's hello@feeltohealanxiety.com. And of course, just like DM on Instagram if that's easier.
Okay. Awesome. Urs, you got anything?
I think that's all.
Okay, very good. All right, Donna, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks. All right,
All right, Donna, have a good rest of
Thank
your day.
you. Thank
Take
you.
care, Donna.
guys.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.